Hello, I'm Linda, and this is No Frills ASMR. This morning, when I got up, I had my phone by my bed and I looked at Reddit and saw a picture that started me on a day-long investigation. And the picture was of what looked like a rocky island cliff kind of area. And I thought the ocean, I can't find the picture again, of course. You know how these things are. You see it and then you go back and it's disappeared forever. But it seemed to me like there was water and then there was the rocky hillside and then, grass up top. And within the rocky hillside, you see the carved out features of a Moai, a statue. And actually, here, let me see if I can manage to draw it real quick for you. Every time I use that, I say it's not working right, and I still say that. To look at that index. So the Moai, they're like these. This is really bad picture, but I'm not an artist. But they're like a head on Easter Island, and they're the stone heads. Well, this one was just fascinating to look at. I was like, whoa. And it was the island here. It seems like the water is down here, and here's the cliffside, and carved within the cliff is, this head and the body, and it's not finished yet. And then there's all this cliff, and I kind of thought I could see some sort of head over here a little bit starting to be carved. And I was like, wait, what is happening? I didn't know this happened. So that started me on a day-long journey of discovery. And I think right now it's like 5 o'clock in the evening. I've literally been reading about them while I worked and stuff, listening to podcasts about this. So I'm going to just tell you about this podcast I listened to because I thought it was really interesting. But let me tell you the name and everything of the podcast. It's called, because I highly recommend you go listen to it. The podcast was called Outside In. I'd never heard of it. I just looked up Easter Island and I happened upon this podcast and I thought it was very good. And the episode was from April 14th of 2022. Yeah. So really, pretty much everything I'm going to tell you just is me kind of retelling you what I heard on this. And I highly recommend you go listen to it because they talk to the actual scientists and stuff. I thought it was very good. And then at the end, I looked at the production company because it was a very well done production, I thought. And one of the, I forget, editors or producers was Rebecca Lavoie, who is on Crime Writers On, which is another podcast I sometimes listen to. I was like, wait, what? Everything's coming together. Anyway, yeah, that podcast. So real quick, just if you don't know what I'm talking about at all, so we're all on the same page here, let's look up. This is a family encyclopedia from the 1990s, I think. So very outdated. However, there it is right there. We'll just read about Easter Island. Isla de Pascua, I think. Volcanic island in the southeast Pacific. The chief town is Hengaroa, the most isolated island in Polynesia. It was discovered by a Dutch navigator on Easter Day in 1722 and has been under Chilean administration since 1888. It is famous for the curious hieroglyphs and formidable statues carved in stone, standing up to 40 feet high. It's mainly hilly grassland. The subtropical climate allows a variety of crops such as sugarcane and bananas. Industries are farming and tourism. Area 63 square miles. Population as of 1982, 1,867 people. So that's Easter Island. I did get out the giant encyclopedia just so I wanted to show you on my globe, the one that I dated one time. And I started looking around for it and I realized I sold it. I sold it off. I don't have it anymore. So that's a bummer. All right, we gotta skip. All right, now's your time to guess where Easter Island is. I guess I just told you when I read that, didn't I? Okay, so this is a map of the Pacific Ocean. This is the North Pacific. This is the South Pacific. And over here, this is showing something else. So pretend like that isn't there because it looks like water. I know on your camera it's hard to see, but these are up closes of like the Hawaiian Islands. This is California. And for those of you who aren't from around here, the fires that you might be hearing about are in Los Angeles, which is here in California. But Los Angeles is huge. So it's, there are a lot of different areas of Los Angeles. But it's big. It's a big fire that keeps spreading. All right, this is Mexico, Central America, South America. Okay, now where Easter Island is I think it's part of Chile, but it is way over here, all by itself. I mean, there's really nothing much around it at all. And this is Isla de Pascua, I think Pascua, Easter Island, Chile, yeah. And they have a map of it, S2. Hold on. Is it S? Where's S2? I don't even see letters on these. Am I blind? Marina, Marshall Island, Carolina Islands. That's TD. Oh. This is it. Isn't it? This is 2. That's not it. Huh. Oh, well, whatever. I don't think it really matters anyway. I mean, it's got to be right here. Where are you? Why does it say S2? That's Saipan, Guam. I had a friend who went to Guam, and she said that was the most beautiful place she'd ever been. All right, I give up. Anyway. Oof. So that's where it is. Okay. So yeah, off the coast of South America, kind of where that whale is. So this podcast, this Outside In podcast was pretty interesting. They were talking to these 2 scientists and some indigenous people from Rapa Nui. And it was all interesting because the theory back like in the 70s when I was growing up, I think, and I used to watch the TV show In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy. And on In Search of, I recall watching it as a kid, and they showed them dragging the figures on wood rollers. It was like wood planks over wood rollers, and they drag them. And even way back then, they would say, or was it ancient aliens who like brought them in? And, they'd show like a spaceship come in and shoot down the figure. So, but the people of the island, the Rapa Nui, they said, no, these are figures that our people made, and there is verbal, oral history talking about it, and just people don't want to listen, basically. So these two scientists go to the island, and their names were Terry Hunt, and they interview these guys on the podcast, and they seem, like good guys. And Carl, I think it's Carl Lippo. And so I think it was Terry. I think it was him talking to the guy interviewing him. And he said, the history had always been that they built these moai as status symbols. And there were two tribes, and there was a huge population boom. And then the tribe started fighting, and they started killing each other off, but also they cut down all the trees on the island in order to move the moai statues. And that led to, there was no trees left, so there was no food, and so they starved themselves off, and they murdered each other, and blah, blah, blah. Well, so that was the story, I think, that had been published and was known. And that kind of depended on some factors. And one factor was the timing of when they last had built these and moved these statues or carvings or whatever. And so Terry Hunt told this story where, and I could have the story a little wrong, definitely go listen to the podcast. But I think kind of the gist of it was he goes there and he's got all the proper equipment to do to collect for radiocarbon dating. And I forget exactly, but they dig down below one of these statues and they find remains of, I think it was like palm or something. And they know it's from the time these things were put in. So they get some of that, and they do that with a bunch of different statues around the islands. So they have different samples. And he sends them to this, I think it was like a radiocarbon dating place he hadn't dealt with in the past. And when they came back, they were off by 600 years what they had expected. And so when the first one came back, he was like, well, that's a mistake. And then the other ones came back, and he thought, well, this company is screwing this up. This is not correct. And these dates are all wrong. And that was his original thinking, So he said he just kind of tried to put it out of his mind. And because he was like, well, that's wrong, And then they sent a bill. And he's like, I don't want to take money out of my little bit of grant money to pay for this misinformation. And so he contacts a scientist friend of his. And he's like, what should I do? They gave me all this wrong stuff. And I know I did good science getting the materials, but the dates are completely wrong. And the scientist he contacted says, don't let your preconceived, I'll have the quote wrong, but it was kind of, don't let your preconceived ideas affect the facts. And he said, like, the minute he was like, oh, this is correct, I'm wrong, it like opened up this whole new world. Because then the timing of everything changed. And just everything about it. He was like, I've been wrong about everything, like the whole time. So then they started to really dig into, was there really a society collapse? Was there even a boom in society on this island that has been told forever? And when they looked at it, they couldn't find any science behind that there was ever any kind of battles. There was never really a boom in population. And the thing that kind of killed off the island's population was when the Westerners came. Well, actually, even before that, there was inter-island travel, and it brought a rat that was from other islands, and that rat eats the seeds of the palm plant, and that killed off the palm trees. And then the Westerners came and landed on their island, and of course, that brings disease, but also people from, I think it was Peru, went and grabbed up the indigenous people of the island and used them as slaves. So they took them off the island and used them as slaves. And they didn't go into it, but the Catholic Church, for some reason, fought to get them back out of slavery and back to the island. But even when they let them come back to the island, they had closed off half the island because they were using it to have sugar plantations or something along those lines. So it just basically, and when they came back, they had smallpox. So it kind of killed off the population. Not completely, but, a lot. So basically, everything that they thought in the past about these things was wrong. So then they started to think about, well, maybe the moving them with trees and the idea that they killed off all the trees was wrong. And that's Terry's story. Now, the secondary story on this podcast is of a man named Sergio and his son, who's also Sergio. And I think the last name's Haoa. And Sergio is a indigenous person of the island. And he went to school in like Montana, I think, and got his master's in archaeology. And he came back to the island and he got grant money. And I think he had 30 like local people. And they all worked on learning more about the carvings, the statues. I don't want to call them statues. What are they? Well, the Moai. And he said long ago that the oral history was that the statues walked from where they were carved. There actually was a quarry where they were carved, which looked different than the picture I saw on Reddit first thing in the morning. It looked like inland, but the Reddit that I saw, it looks like it was right on the water, so I'm not sure about that. And so Sergio's like, they walked, and he said on the podcast he has 14 points to prove they walked. And the podcast host said, well, can you tell us those? And he said, no, because some scientist is going to just steal them and publish them, and I won't get credit. And that's like, oh. Okay, so that is the two things happening on the podcast. And so Terry, I think it was Terry or Carl, one of these two, is talking about how there are moai that are already placed along the outside of the island. They kind of look inward, like the island. I don't know. the shape, but the island's kind of, whoops, it's not dry enough. Sorry. Hold on. The island's like, however, but it's like they're placed kind of all around, it seemed like, from a picture I saw. And I read one place there were 1,000 of them. I don't know. And they're facing like inward. But the quarry is all in one spot, I guess, if I'm understanding that correctly. Anyway, but they could see these ancient like roadways. So there were some that were they're called road Moai, and they're along the road. And I think now they think they were in the process of moving these. But they hadn't made it to their final destination yet. And so when he was looking at the road Moai, he said they're a little different because, and this is, I was listening to this, so I could be totally misunderstanding, but he said they're not like finished on the bottom. They were kind of, my understanding, they're kind of bulbous, so they're kind of like not that much, but not flat, not totally flat. And he kind of looked at him and thought, oh, they could rock a little bit. They could just rock. And so that led him to the thought that maybe in order to move these things, instead of putting them on wood planks or anything like that, they actually did it like you would a refrigerator. You know how when you have a refrigerator, you might put a rope around it and you kind of walk it, boom, boom, boom. You kind of go like, and walk it along. That's what he decided they did with these things. So they would tie ropes around there and have guys here and guys over here, and then in the back, these guys are here to keep it from falling. They're just, because it's kind of tips forward, I think, the way it is on the bottom. And these guys are pulling it sort of boom, boom, and giving it a step, and then boom, boom, and giving it a step, boom, boom. And these guys keep it from falling. Okay, so that is his theory. And that seems pretty cool, right? Actually, you know what? Look, we could use our Mickey to show. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. This will be fun. What's in the box? What's in the box? Okay. So their thinking is that drop your guns, guys. Drop your weapons. We don't need weapons for this. Oops, sorry. So their thinking is they'd like oh my gosh, sorry. I should have thought this out more. Have a rope that way, and a rope this way, and a rope, this way. Okay. And these were all, in the demonstration, they were kind of tied around the guy. Like that. So they'd have a rope going this way, and these guys would have a rope going this way. And then these guys would have their rope over here. And then there is a video you can watch. They'd go, heave, ho, heave, ho, heave, ho. And then they get it going. And then when they're ready to stop, it wants to fall forward, but they're holding it back. And then it's good. So they go, heave, whoops, heave, ho. So that was their theory. And this is Terry and Carl's theory. So then they get a call from National Geographic. And National Geographic's like, that's a great theory. How about you do it for real to prove? And they were like, look, we know how to have a theory, but you need to have people who know how to do things because we don't know how to do that. And National Geographic was basically like, you either do it or there's no show, you know. So like, okay, fine. So they set it all up. They got like a 30-foot, I don't think it was a real one. I don't know. I think it was a, replica. And they got some guys and they did it, and the thing starts walking, and it walks. And Terry takes video of it, like a 30-second video, and he's like, oh my gosh, we did it, So they go back to, their houses or whatever, and he tells his friend, who is a indigenous person, he's like, look, I gotta show you the video. So he shows her the video, and as soon as she sees it, she puts her hands on her hips, and she starts, I just put my hands on my hips like you can see, and she starts doing this dance where she goes back and forth, and she's singing a song. And he's like, what are you singing? And she said, it's the Walking Moia song. We all learn it in elementary school. And he's like, wait, what? And she's like, yeah, I mean, we've always thought they walked, and that's what they teach you in school, and we all sing the song and do the dance. And he's like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. So then he shows the video to a town hall full of indigenous people. And while they're showing the Walking Moia, they all start singing the song. And he's like, oh my gosh. And when you hear it on the podcast, you're like, oh, that's a crazy story. But then they bring Sergio back on, who he's like, yeah, no duh, I've been telling everybody this since forever, and it's not until a couple of white scientists say it that it counts. Uh-oh. So now Sergio, his son is kind of mad about the whole thing because the walking theory is now called the Hunt Lippo or something like that. It's like named after these guys. And his son's like, for my dad to not get credit when he worked with them and told them the theory isn't cool and isn't right. But Sergio, he's a little salty, but he does admit that people had asked him to publish about it, and he's like, I'm not ready to publish because I want to find out more information before I publish. And the truth is, if you don't publish, then nobody knows about it. If you're just telling people, nobody knows about it. And that's kind of what Terry and Carl, they're like the only reason we get credit. And they do give credit to Sergio in the paper they wrote that he worked with them on it. But they're like, it's because we published, So I don't know. I don't know. But the moral of the story is these things probably, it seems like, were walked to their destination, which seems like really cool. I always imagine them being like dragged somehow. But what Sergio talked about that I found very interesting too, he has been, doing research since the 1980s on these things, doing archaeological digs and really, really studying them. And he said one time I forget if he was in the quarry or near a statue, but he found these pieces of coral. And I think he's found red, white, and black coral, I think. And he's like, well, these are carved coral pieces. What would these be for? And he's studying them one night, and then he's like, oh, I know what they are. And so the next day, he goes out and tries it in the eye socket of the one he found it near, and it fit perfectly. And that's when he realized these things had red, white, or black eyes. And he's like, wow. And then later, and I'm not sure if Sergio found this or who found this, I read about this outside of the podcast, but they found these, I think they're also made out of coral. They're hats, and they look like kind of like that, and they're like red. They're just coral. I think they're made out of coral, and they're each one of these had an eyeball and a hat. And then some of them, when they've dug them up, they were buried to like here. But now they have dug and they are like so much taller. You can see pictures where they are like that big. They go way down. And then there was at least one or more, I don't know, that has hieroglyphs all over its backside. There's writings on it. This is not official hieroglyphs that I'm writing. It's just for example. So that was pretty cool. So they have excavated these things like all the way out and down. It's really crazy. They're so cool. I'm trying to think what else. I read somewhere that they originally found like over 1,000 on the island. Now, I only saw that one place, so I don't know how many are left right now. But I do know that a lot of them have been taken away. Like, I think there's one in the Louvre and one in the museum in London. Other museums, like Smithsonian has one, but it's a replica. But they have taken some off the island. I don't know what else. I would love to go and see these things, but they are really out in the middle of the ocean. There must be a way to get there. I don't know. I'm trying to think if there was any other cool stuff about them. They're really pretty neat. Oh, I know one thing. They said, and they didn't say this on the podcast, but I read it maybe in a Reddit thread, I don't know, that they stopped the walking of the guy after the camera stopped rolling because the bottom was getting chips and stuff in it. So I don't know. So does that say no, that doesn't work? I don't know. And then I was watching just random YouTube videos, and I saw a guy, it was like from 13 years ago, and he had a piece of board, and it was on just a very slight slant. And he built a guy that looked like one of the Moia. And then he made a pyramid-shaped walker thingamajigger over it. I don't know how it works. I'm not a scientist. But it walked down the board by itself with no help. So that's crazy. So could that be a way they moved him? I don't know. It was like a wood triangle like this. So it was like this would be one leg, this is a leg, and this is a leg. And this would swing. So it kind of went and it walked. It walked down like boop, boop, beep, boop, beep. It was crazy. Anyway, the podcast was interesting because it taught me a lot about them, but also was a pretty good discussion on, listening to the indigenous people, because they have been telling the walking story since time, like forever. That story has been their oral history, but nobody was really listening, it seems. So that was interesting. It kind of reminded me of when I went to Alaska, and they do these talks on board the ship. And one of the speakers was a very white woman who was speaking about the totem poles. And she had some things she said where she said, well, the indigenous people might not agree with me, but this is why this is like this. And basically they argue with me about it, but they're wrong. And as soon as she said that, it rubbed me wrong a little bit. Like, they're wrong about their own oral history. Like, I don't know. And then we went to the Totem Museum in, I think it was Ketchikan. And basically they were like, some people claim that this means this, but that is inaccurate. So it's like they were kind of fighting against each other. And I would tend to think that the people whose history it is probably know better. So we didn't go to any more of her talks because we found her, we didn't really like her that much anyway. But yeah, that was weird. This kind of looks more like a Muppet or something. I wish I had a picture. Hold on, let's see if my book of cultural literacy has a picture. I feel like maybe I saw it in here one time. Easter Island, ABCDE. Easter, East Germany, Eastern Orthodox, Easter. What? How do you not have Easter Island? It just says Easter. I'm shocked. What? Huh. Shucks. I wish I brought my iPad up here. I could have shown you a picture. Well, you'll have to look it up. Look up the video of it walking and pictures of the island. It's really very interesting. All right, well, hopefully that wasn't too boring. But I do recommend this outside in podcast. That was good. I'm going to listen to more of that. I'm driving. I was going to drive to Tennessee today, but I couldn't because of snow. So I'm going to drive tomorrow. But I think I might listen to more of that podcast and see what's up. So, who knows what I'll share. All right.